In this session of BimlFlex, we're going to be looking at business keys and relationships and how to bring them together. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about the enterprise business key. You know, that's a topic if you're looking at Data Vault, but it is also actually if you're building a data mart, you have to have a business key that actually brings things together on. Then we're going to look at how do we integrate by business key and the object relationships of them. So let me first look at when I'm going to show you the demo here. What we're going to do is we're going to take our Excel add-in, we're going to point it at a data source. We're just going to look at AdventureWorks. We're going to pull the metadata in from that. I'm going to show you a couple of additions and things that you can do to tweak the metadata coming in. That metadata then gets persisted in a database where all the metadata is tracked and audited, and we then pull it into BimL Studio. And BimL Studio generates all the code. So that's the code generator for you that stays there. So let's first talk about an enterprise-wide business key. I also like to refer to it as the magical unicorn, because in all the projects that I've done to date, I've never really had a solution or a customer that had an enterprise-wide business key. And even if they've had one like a social security number or another type of key, it's highly unlikely that these keys or these keys exist in every single source system. And that's where you get into master data management. So instead, what I would like to do is say, let's focus on an integration key. I might be mixing integration and business keys here a little bit, but it's basically a key that uniquely defined and standalone. And it has business meaning. However, you know, it does uniquely identify across business areas. As I said, you know, that is the theory of it. In practice, when you look at source systems, it's very seldom that you'll have a customer code in one system that is the same as the customer code in another system, because most of these systems will use internal identities or IDs, right? But anyway, what we need to do is we need to say, okay, so we're going to integrate by the business key. And this is actually a critical concept of Data Vault. And it ties together the same data across data sets. So keys from different systems might need to be linked to match. In other words, you might actually have data coming in from one system. We're going to look at this in a little bit here. Also, in the last couple of Data Vault presentations and seminars that I've attended, there seems to be a de-emphasis on the business key. And instead, what they do is they say, let's just use an integration key, and then we use same as links to actually bring them together. So let's look at a practical example. So again, I'm referring to AdventureWorks here, but I'll explain this in the same way. Let's just say you have a source system 1, and you look at a table like this. You'll have two possible some samples here of integration, right? Keys that you can use. You have the product number and you have the product ID. Either one of those might be a candidate to be the business key. But let's bring in a second source system. So let's just say you have a second source system and it has the same product ID. So as you can see here, product ID, the product number is the same, but the product is actually not the same. The product ID is the same, but again, it's not the same product here. Okay, so you have a mix of product IDs and combinations here. So this is saying to you that I've got two different source systems here. Let's bring them into a hub. So what will happen in a hub is you'll have the record source and you'll have the business key. So if I'm using the product number here as a business key, what you will see here is that there is going to be a duplication here. So source 1 has 706 and source 2 has 706. Source 1 has 707 and source 2 has 707. Right? In the same case here where source 2 has this number and that number. Now, if we were to follow the pattern for Data Vault, it will need a unique business key. So as you can see here, we will only have the first arriving business key here, right? So instead of having the 8 records or the 6 records, you now only have 4 records. Now, one possible solution to this would then to be actually say, hey, make the record source or a unique identifier that tells us where that record source comes. Let's add that to the business key or the integration key that we've chosen here. And in BimlFlex, really what we have is we have this sort of helper function, flex to BK, where if you put this @rs in front of it, it will actually append whatever your record source is in front of the key to make it unique across your integration layers. And then what we will do is we will say, well, let's create a same as link, which says that, you know, this key and this key is the same, possibly. and possibly this one here. So what you will do is you'll then use same as link and business vault logic to determine which keys are actually the same. So as you can see here, we are kind of combining those things there, right? Okay, so now a concatenated the business key. Now in BimlFlex, we take multiple keys where a source system has multiple keys, like in this case here, customer address ID, customer ID and address ID combined makes the business key. So in BimlFlex, we use a single business key. In other words, to integrate the data across systems, we actually say, well, if it's got multiple key, we concatenate that into a single business key. And I have had these discussions with a number of customers. Well, hold on, why do I not have a hub and have customer ID and address ID in the hub? And our reasoning for that is that when you bring another source system in that you do not know, if you're building an agile data vault here, you're starting off with one source system and it may have a customer ID and an address as the primary key or the business key. And yes, you may want to split that in as two integer columns. But then you bring in your second source system and all of a sudden it's got a customer code and an address code that is varchars, and now all of a sudden those keys don't match. So what we do is we say, right, let's put this into a big enough business key. And this, I believe, is now becoming more and more the name pattern. And then let's add the record source to the front of it to make it unique. That's optional, and I'll show you in a minute how that is optional. Then what we need to do is we need to talk about relationships. So the way that we refine relationships in BimlFlex is in the column reference table and reference column. And this means that you can have relationships in your metadata that may not exist in your source system. So you may have a source system where there is no referential trade, there is no foreign keys. And within BimlFlex, we actually can add these business keys in here. So as I said here, you can create these references here. And a reference, like in a database system, can only reference the primary key of another table. So if I'm adding a reference from product category here back to product category, or from product to product category, it must reference the primary key here. In this scenario here, I'll show you how we implement that into BimlFlex right now. So let's just look at if we want to change or add a business key. Let's say you're looking at a table and it comes in and it's got some internal GUID or some internal ID that really has no purpose. So you might have the integer inside of their identity column in there, but you may then also have a real world business key in there. And what you want to do is you want to configure that. So what we're going to do here is we can actually go ahead and there's a number of things here. You can add join SQL where you combine tables and columns from different tables here. But what we're going to do here is we're actually going to look at changing the product category. Instead of using the product category ID, we want to use the name. Now this is not a real world example here, but this is just to show you how you will do that and how you will configure that in BimlFlex, just so you can get a nice understanding of how you may do that. So without further ado, I'm going to go straight into BimlFlex and just show you how to do this. Okay, so here I've got in BimlFlex in the Excel add-in, and I'm going to import some metadata from AdventureWorks here. So I'm just going to go in here and point this to AdventureWorks. I think it's that one, and we're going to bring it into this project. And for the purpose of this explanation, I'm only going to bring in product and product category just to keep it as small as possible. Now, when we import the metadata, you can see here I can add the record source as default. I can go and say, hey, add the record source to the business key as a default option, and then also change any references. So let's just say you have the product linking to the product category. You want to say, change that to reference on these new inferred business keys. So I'm also going to select those, and I really do recommend that you check both of these, especially if you're building for the data vault. So I'm going to go ahead and say import metadata here, and on this object screen, I'm just going to set current sheet. I'm going to do the same here on the columns. I'm just going to scroll all the way to the top where it's brought in the columns here, and let me take you through what has just happened here. So on the product, I have the product ID, which was the primary key. Because I have selected that I want to create business keys from my primary key or my business key, it have added another column in here. That is the default of it is string one number, and those are settings that you can set. It's made it the primary key and the business key. So that's the first thing. And then if I scroll over to the right here, you'll see that I've got a flex to BK here of record source and product ID because I've selected that. The next thing that I want to show you here is also down the bottom here. I now have the product category, which is also the primary key and the business key, but I also have the product here on the product table because the product has a reference to product category. I have now created another business key here, which is then the product category. So instead of the reference being on the business key, I have the relationship between product and product category on this product category business key. In the same way as product category here actually references itself. So product, there's a parent-child relationship here, and we have the product category business key sitting over here. So that's how we do it on the import of these things. Now let's look what happens if we want to create our business keys and projects ourselves. So I'm just going to go and archive these data here and start again, really with nothing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead here and say import metadata. I'm going to import the same tables here. I'm just going to import the product and product category table, but I'm going to simulate a source system that doesn't have any primary keys and any foreign keys and stuff, and we're going to add those manually. So I'm going to check these things here, but let's just say I don't want to infer any metadata here. Okay, and I'll go ahead here and I say import here. Okay, so we go ahead here, and there's the product and product category. Again, I'm just going to set that over here. Go over to the columns here, and as you can see here, I have my primary key business keys. Those are empty. I'm kind of don't have any of those. I do have my foreign keys here, but I'm going to actually go ahead and remove this because I want to show you how we actually will do this if let's just say we didn't have any foreign keys there, right? So the first thing we're going to do here is I'm just going to set current sheet here, just so it sets this metadata into the database, and now I can work with it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a business key for both tables. So all I need to do is select the product ID here, and I say generate business key, and it will use the default name here. I want to say this is the business key, and I'm going to put this, I want to put my business key at the front, and I'm going to add my record source here. Okay, so now I've got created my my first business key here for the product. I also want to set this as my primary key. Okay, and the next one is I want to do the same thing on my product category. So again, I'll just hit business category over there. I'll hit that again, add those, and boom, there we go. So that's how quickly I've just added 2 business keys to the system. Now you could have selected. I'll actually do that just so you can see. So let's just say my business key is multiple columns. I hit generate business key. You'll see here that it puts those business keys in that order. Okay. So now I have my 2 business keys, and again, I'm gonna, as I go along, I'm just gonna go and set currency here. You'll see that this is not persisted is also flagged. It means that anything that you're deriving in your metadata, derived columns, you really don't want to persist that because you may change your mind. You might change the business key, and then you have already persisted data there. So I'm going to go ahead and say set current sheet now, and then I'll actually get current sheet so that my metadata is ordered in the way that I want to have it ordered. So as you can see here, I've got my product business key here, and I've got my product category business key here. My errors are gone. Now I want to add a foreign key between product and product category. So again, I select the column or multiple columns that makes up that business key. I again hit generate business key, and I'm going to add the record source. I'm going to put it at the bottom here, and I'm going to rename this to product category business key, and I've got my reference, and I'm adding this at the bottom. So I hit create business key. I'll say okay, and now what I also want to do here is I also want to go ahead, oops, a little bit too far, and I actually want to connect this up to my product. So I want to connect this up to my product on it. Actually, sorry, I want to connect this up to my product category, and I want to join it to product category BK. Beautiful. Set current sheet, and I'm not going to add the other reference here, but that's how I've manually created the references. So now that I have that metadata, I can go into BimlFlex and actually see how that will affect my system. So I can go and refresh my metadata here, and this will bring in the tables, and it'll bring in, I've enabled some other things here, but it brings in my 2 tables. And if I want to see what this is going to look like as my data vault, because remember, I've now added my reference there, I can go ahead here and just select it. Right, there's my project there. I commit that, And then I preview my data vault, and as you can see here, I'll get my hubs and my link and my satellite there, all just from at that one reference there. And that's how you can edit it. So hopefully what you've learned, what you've seen in this session here is how easy it is to define business keys or integration keys, depending on how you want to refer to that, and how to combine or join tables or reference tables inside of BimlFlex. So I'd like to thank you for watching this webinar, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.